He was written as a deep-dyed, snarling villain, and he bored the out of me, because there is no longevity in deep-dyed, snarling villainy. And already I started to plan what I was going to do about that. Irwin not only allowed me to do that, but one day said, "Do more." And I did. And the rest, as we say, is history.
They called it the greatest sci-fi show of the 1960s. Millions watched it every week. But behind the iconic robot and the adventure stories was a truth Hollywood desperately wanted hidden. When the last surviving cast member passed away in 2025, she finally revealed what really happened inside that spaceship. The actor who was supposed to be a villain rewrote television history. The leading man became a ghost on his own show. And a man inside a 200-pound suit suffered invisibly while everyone laughed. This is the story nobody was supposed to know. On October 23, 2025, June Lockhart died peacefully in her sleep in Santa Monica, California. She was 100 years old. For most people, this was simply a sad news story. An elderly actress passing away. Another Hollywood obituary in a long list of forgotten names. But for the people who really understood the story of Lost in Space, this moment meant something completely different. It meant that the last person who could tell the truth had finally gone silent. June Lockhart was not just another actor on a 1960s television show. She was the mother of the Robinson family. She was the last surviving adult star from a show that changed television forever. She had watched nearly everyone around her disappear. She had carried secrets for 60 years. And in her final interviews before she died, she started talking. The cancellation of Lost in Space happened suddenly and without warning. There was no goodbye. There was no final episode that wrapped up the story. The Robinson family was left stranded on an alien planet, still believing they would return in 8 weeks for a season 4 that would never exist. June Lockhart did not find out from the network. She read it in her morning newspaper. Just a small notice in the entertainment section. That was how CBS ended one of the most watched science fiction shows in American television history. But the cancellation was only one secret. It was not even the biggest one. What happened inside that fiberglass spaceship went far beyond a simple ratings failure. While millions of viewers watched the robot wave its accordion arms and warn about danger, they had no idea what was really going on behind the cameras. One actor had secretly rewritten his entire character, changing the entire show in the process. Another actor, the one who was supposed to be the star, was slowly being erased from his own series. And inside a metal suit that weighed 200 pounds, a man was suffering in ways the production company had decided did not matter. These stories had been locked away for decades. The people involved kept them hidden, partly out of loyalty, and partly out of the unspoken agreement that you do not talk about how Hollywood works. You just accept it and move on. But when you are 100 years old, and you know you are running out of time, something changes inside you. You stop protecting the people who never protected you. That is exactly what June Lockhart did. Before there was a robot. Before there was Dr. Smith with his melodramatic wails and his creative insults. Before there was anything that looked like the show the world would fall in love with, there was a different version of Lost in Space. A version that was serious. A version that was dramatic. A version that Irwin Allen, the show's creator, believed was the finest work of his entire career. He was wrong about a lot of things. But on this point, he was probably right. In late 1964, Allen filmed a 60-minute pilot called No Place to Hide. The budget was staggering for television at that time, $600,000. This was the most expensive television pilot ever created. Think about that. In the 1960s, networks were making entire seasons for the price that this single pilot cost. Allen did not cheap out. He hired a cinematographer who had won 3 Academy Awards. He brought in a special effects supervisor who would later win an Oscar. He brought in a writer who would eventually contribute scripts to Star Trek. He was not making a simple television show. He was trying to make art. The story was clean and entirely serious. A family called the Robinsons launched their ship toward Alpha Centauri. A meteor storm knocked them off course. They landed on an alien planet and had to survive. Both parents held doctorates in science. The children were prodigies. There was no villain. There was no comedy. There was no internal conflict. It was a survival story about brilliant people facing a frightening situation with intelligence and cooperation. Will Robinson sat around a campfire and sang Greensleeves. That was the tone. That was the vision. When Allen screened the pilot for CBS executives, something unexpected happened. The executives did not sit in professional silence. They laughed with delight. They bought the series immediately. They saw exactly what Allen was trying to create, and they loved it. Then they handed him a list of demands. The executives told Allen that the pilot was too hardware-driven. It focused too much on the ship and the science, and not enough on drama. They wanted a recurring antagonist. They wanted a villain who could create conflict every single week without requiring new alien threats. Allen suggested Ming the Merciless, the Flash Gordon villain. His story editor pushed for something closer to Long John Silver. They compromised on Dr. Zachary Smith, a character who did not exist in the original pilot. CBS also demanded a robot. The network wanted more appeal for younger viewers. They wanted something that could become a toy. They wanted something cute and memorable. The ship was redesigned. New sets were built. And the original Sirius pilot, the one Allen had poured so much passion into, was locked away in a storage vault. Approximately 80% of that original footage was eventually cut up and inserted into the first 5 episodes of Season 1. Dr. Smith and the robot were conveniently written as having stayed behind at the ship, explaining their mysterious absence from footage that was filmed almost a year before they were even created. The show that aired was not the show that Allen had originally imagined. Before Jonathan Harris became Dr. Smith, he was a pharmacist's son from a 6-story tenement building in the Bronx. His parents were Russian immigrants. His father worked in Manhattan's garment district. The boy grew up speaking what he later described as thick Bronx street slang, and he made a decision early in his life that changed everything. He was going to become someone else entirely. At 17 years old, he changed his surname from Karasukin to Harris. His father was furious and objected violently. But Jonathan Harris did not care. He earned a pharmacy degree he never planned to use. He fabricated an acting resume. He talked his way into Broadway. He appeared on The Twilight Zone. He performed in roughly 125 stage productions. He was a man who had invented himself from nothing. When Owen Allen offered him the role of Dr. Zachary Smith on Lost in Space, Harris read the character description and immediately understood what he was looking at. Smith was a cold-blooded spy. He killed a guard in the pilot's opening minutes. He reprogrammed the robot to kill the Robinson family in their sleep. He was designed to be completely despicable and eliminated within 5 episodes. 5 episodes. That was the entire arc. Harris understood something that most actors never figure out. A role that ends in 5 episodes is not a career. It is an expensive dead end. So he started rewriting things. At first, it was quiet. He would arrive on set with entirely new pages of dialogue written overnight. He would tell the cast, "Let us go over the scene. I have changed all the dialogue." Bill Mumy, who was only 10 years old at the time, watched this and later described it with genuine awe. Harris was rewriting scenes while also engineering every single beat of action, so that all roads led back to Smith. The cowardly eye rolls. The melodramatic wailing about his back. Most importantly, the cascade of invented insults hurled at the robot. None of it appeared in any script. Harris sat up late at night constructing phrases like bubble-headed booby, nickel-plated nincompoop, and bellicose bumpkin. He explained his reasoning with perfect logic. The robot was wise to Smith's schemes. Smith had to attack it constantly to keep it from exposing him. Every insult was a survival tactic dressed as comedy. By the time Irwin Allen understood what had happened, something extraordinary had occurred. 500 fan letters a month were pouring in for Dr. Smith. The audience was not writing about Will Robinson or the robot or the adventure. They were writing about the character that was supposed to die in episode 5. Allen had no realistic choice but to celebrate it. He later said openly, "Smith was not originally created as a comedy character, but Jonathan Harris dictated what we should do with the character." Harris negotiated a special guest star credit on every single one of all 83 episodes. This was reportedly the first time that billing structure had ever appeared on American television. But Allen's public praise hit a private problem. The actor he had hired to be his leading hero was watching his entire role disappear in front of him. And there was nothing either of them could do about it anymore. Guy Williams came to Lost in Space as one of the most recognizable men on American television. He had spent 4 years playing Zorro on Disney. Zorro had made him a genuine star. The show's merchandise alone had generated $11 million within months of its premiere. He was tall. He had been trained in fencing since he was 7 years old. He was genuinely excited about playing John Robinson, the brilliant mission commander who would lead his family through the universe. This was supposed to be his show. He was supposed to be the hero. The transformation happened gradually enough that it felt almost polite at first. In Season 1, his screen time began shrinking as the Dr. Smith storylines expanded. By Season 2, it was a pattern. By Season 3, it was simply the reality of the production. Williams would arrive on set, deliver a handful of lines, and stand in the background while Jonathan Harris and Bill Mumy and the robot carried the episode forward. What happened next changed everything. Mark Goddard, who played the pilot Don West, described the atmosphere directly. The show started going more toward the robot and Smith, he said, and there were hard feelings from Guy especially. The set had become uncomfortable. Williams was watching his own series slip away from him in real time. Jonathan Harris, the man responsible for this situation, actually acknowledged the damage. That is remarkable considering that he was causing it. Harris said openly that Williams was hired to be the star of the piece and ended up with occasional lines every other week. He called this very difficult for an actor to endure. He was correct. He just did not stop doing it. Williams filled his idle hours doing things to distract himself. He listened to classical music. He read books about astronomy. He played chess. He bought stocks. Bill Mumy gave him a nickname, the Comb. Williams groomed himself constantly between takes, a man turning restless energy into something harmless. In one reported exchange with Harris, Williams erupted with words that revealed the pain underneath. "God damn it, I will kill you, Harris," he said. Then he paused and added, "I mean Smith." Whether it was accidental or deliberate, those words captured something completely real about the situation. The man was losing his mind slowly, hidden behind professional courtesy. After the show was canceled, Williams discovered something devastating. His Hollywood career had not survived being the background character on his own series. No one wanted to hire him. No one remembered him as the star. He had become invisible. Then something unexpected happened. Halfway around the world, his situation was completely reversed. In Argentina, Zorro had become a cultural institution. The government gave him a luxury apartment in a marina. The wife of President Perón personally invited him to perform at a charity event. He spent the last 21 years of his life living as something close to royalty in a country that had never forgotten who he was. But on May 6, 1989, police entered his Buenos Aires apartment after friends reported his disappearance. What they found changed everything about how we understand the story. Every child who watched Lost in Space in the 1960s loved the robot. It waved its accordion arms. It barked warnings in that distinctive electronic voice. Somehow, despite being made entirely of metal and rubber, it managed to feel warm. It managed to feel alive. For 3 years, every single movement that robot made, every gesture, every step, came from one person. And that person was suffering in ways nobody wanted to know about. Bob May walked into the Lost in Space audition completely by accident. He was at 20th Century Fox applying for a different job entirely. Owen Allen's team sent him to try on the robot suit. The audition was brutally simple. They told him, "If you fit, you are hired." When May climbed out of the suit after his first session inside, he was cut and bleeding from the metal edges. His skin was torn, but he took the job anyway. He needed the work. The suit weighed approximately 200 pounds. Under the hot studio lights, the interior temperature became what May later described as his own personal jacuzzi and sauna combined. The costume was nearly airtight. There was barely any oxygen getting in. On at least 2 confirmed occasions across the 3 seasons, May passed out inside the suit from lack of oxygen. His eyes rolled back. His body went limp. Crew members had to rush over and get him out before something worse happened. The production company's official response to these incidents was simple. There was no time to stop filming. May was a devoted smoker. During breaks between takes, he would smoke cigarettes inside the costume. June Lockhart recalled seeing smoke drifting through the robot's seams and finding it quietly amusing. According to legend, Owen Allen arrived between scenes one day, spotted smoke rising from the apparently empty robot, and panicked that the suit was on fire. When he discovered it was May enjoying a cigarette inside, Allen made a decision. Whenever a script called for the robot to emit smoke, May would personally generate it by smoking inside the suit. Despite performing every physical gesture that made the robot one of television's most beloved characters, Bob May was never credited on screen. Not one episode. Not in all 3 seasons. His name did not appear anywhere. The practical consequence was devastating. Lower pay. Significantly reduced residuals. As Lost in Space grew into a global phenomenon, generating licensing income across decades, May and his wife Judith were living in a mobile home park in the San Fernando Valley. In November 2008, the Sayre fire destroyed their home. 2 months later, May died of congestive heart failure at 69 years old. But what defined his later years was not bitterness. It was extraordinary generosity. He became one of the most beloved figures on the science fiction convention circuit. He would stay at signing tables until every single fan had their moment. No matter how long it took. He said once, "I will stay at any convention signing autographs until the last fan is finished, or the cleaning crew forces me to leave." A man made invisible by the industry that profited from him chose to make sure that no fan ever felt invisible in front of him. The robot smiled for 60 years. Inside, there was a story of sacrifice that nobody knew. By the 3rd season of Lost in Space, something fundamental had changed. The show was no longer trying to tell stories about survival and adventure. It was simply trying to fill airtime. The budget had been cut. The ambition had evaporated. The writers were running out of ideas, and it showed. The episode that stands as the purest symbol of this creative collapse was called The Great Vegetable Rebellion. In this episode, Dr. Smith picks a flower on an alien planet and is put on trial by a sentient plant creature. He is then transformed into a stalk of celery. The central villain of the episode was a man in a full-body foam rubber carrot costume. The writer, Peter Packer, arrived at Jonathan Harris's dressing room holding the script behind his back. He was too embarrassed to hand it over directly. Harris looked at it and understood immediately what had happened. The show had given up. It was no longer interested in being taken seriously. Guy Williams and June Lockhart could not get through their scenes without laughing. The material was absurd. The premise was ridiculous. How could anyone deliver these lines with a straight face?
They tried.
They really tried. But every take broke into laughter. Owen Allen was furious. He saw their inability to maintain composure as disrespect. As a punishment, he wrote both of them out of the next 2 episodes entirely. They still received full salary. They just could not appear on set. That was Allen's way of disciplining actors who did not take his vision seriously. What happened next is where this story becomes genuinely strange. In 1997, TV Guide published a list of the 100 greatest television episodes in American history.
It was a prestigious list.
Shows from across decades competed for a spot. The Great Vegetable Rebellion, the Carrot episode, the episode that was supposed to represent everything wrong with Lost in Space by Season 3, appeared at number 76. The episode that was widely considered the single greatest hour of Star Trek ever produced, an episode called The City on the Edge of Forever, appeared at number 92. The Carrot episode ranked higher than Star Trek's masterpiece. Television is not a rational medium. It does not always reward the best work. Sometimes it rewards the most memorable work. Sometimes it rewards the work that stays in people's hearts longest, regardless of whether it was supposed to be good. The Robinson family never reached Alpha Centauri. The show never found a way to bring them home. It ended in failure and foam rubber vegetables. But it ended having created something that lasted beyond cancellation, beyond ratings, beyond the decade it aired in. The cast carried that story forward for 60 years. But the network that canceled it tried to bury it forever. What nobody outside their inner circle knew for decades was something remarkable. The cast that survived stayed loyal to each other for 60 years. They did not drift apart. They did not pretend the show never happened. They did not distance themselves from a series that had damaged their careers. They kept showing up for one another. Angela Cartwright was 13 when Lost in Space began filming. Bill Mumy was 10. They went through their entire adolescence together on that set. They were tutored together at Fox's studio school. They ate lunch together. They ran lines together. They learned what it meant to work as actors while still becoming themselves as people. Mumy described it later with characteristic directness. We were each other's first true love. He waited until he was old enough to drive before inviting Cartwright on a proper date. Not because anyone required it, but because he wanted the occasion to feel right. They were briefly engaged in the early 1970s before ending the relationship quietly and without bitterness. Two young people recognizing they were still becoming themselves. What nobody predicted was what came next. For more than 50 years, they remained genuinely close friends. Not politely distant. Actually close. They co-authored multiple books together. They appeared at conventions together. They stayed connected in ways that most people from shared childhoods never manage. Then there was Mumy's other secret. While spending his working days fighting alien monsters for Lost in Space, he was going home every evening and watching Star Trek with devoted enthusiasm. He was, in his own words, a committed Trekkie through the entire run of the show that was supposedly Star Trek's rival. He was so committed that decades later, he made it official by appearing in a Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode. His character, a Starfleet officer named Kellen, dies in combat. The producer reportedly got a considerable kick out of killing Will Robinson. The rivalry between the shows was real, but the cast's loyalty to each other ran deeper than any network competition. On March 17, 2026, Bill Mumy posted a photograph of himself standing with Angela Cartwright and Marta Kristen. All three Robinson children, still alive, still showing up for one another. He captioned it simply, Judy, Penny, and Will Robinson, spotted on Earth yesterday. 60 years after the show first aired, they were still finding each other. That single fact tells you something important about what Lost in Space really was underneath the foam rubber aliens and the spray-painted props. It was not just a television show. It was a family that learned to survive together in ways that mattered far more than ratings or network decisions. The Robinson family never made it home in the story, but the people who played them never stopped finding their way back to each other. When the network canceled Lost in Space in 1968, it tried to bury the show's legacy. CBS wanted everyone to move on and forget. But the show refused to disappear. It lived on in reruns. It lived on in the hearts of people who had grown up watching it. And most importantly, it lived on in the people who had made it. Jonathan Harris spent the rest of his career as a prolific voice actor. He voiced Manny in Pixar's A Bug's Life in 1998. He appeared in Toy Story 2 the following year. He voiced a character on the animated series Freakazoid that was an explicit Dr. Smith parody, playing a version of himself playing a version of the character he had perfected over 40 years. He never stopped working. He never stopped creating. When the 1998 Lost in Space film was produced, the studio offered Harris a 6-line cameo. He rejected it with words that immediately became famous in Hollywood circles. They offered me an innocuous 6-line bit they laughingly called a cameo, and I told them exactly where to shove it. He had never played a bit part in his life, and he was not going to start at 83. In November 2002, Harris entered a hospital for a chronic back problem, the same back that Dr. Smith had wailed about in melodramatic agony for 3 seasons. He died of a blood clot. He was 3 days short of his 88th birthday. A reunion film titled Lost in Space, The Journey Home, which was in development with Harris set to star, died with him. Bill Mumy delivered one of the eulogies. Angela Cartwright wrote that she could still hear exactly the way Harris had said her name. But the legacy did not end there. The Netflix reboot that ran from 2018 to 2021 found an elegant way to honor what came before. The rebooted Dr. Smith was given the full name June Harris, combining June Lockhart and Jonathan Harris into a single character name. Bill Mumy appeared in the pilot as a character identified simply as Dr. Z. Smith. Angela Cartwright played Dr. Smith's mother in Season 2. And June Lockhart, at 96 years old, voiced Alpha Control in Season 3. Her voice carried everything you expected from it after 60 years of watching her: intelligence, warmth, and the quiet authority of someone who had been doing this since 1965. She died 2 years later at 100, peacefully in her sleep, having watched the series canceled, revived, mocked, celebrated, rebooted, and preserved across 3 generations of fans. If you enjoy discovering the hidden stories behind the world's biggest names, subscribe now, because the next part of this story reveals something most people never knew about what happened behind the scenes of other classic television shows. She carried the story of that cold newspaper morning in 1968 not as a wound, but as something she had survived and moved past. That capacity for grace, to endure what the industry did to them and remain generous about it, was the quality the 3 Robinson children who are still alive share most completely. They carry the Jupiter 2 with them not as a burden, but as proof that something genuinely extraordinary happened inside that fiberglass spaceship. Before you go, subscribe if you love uncovering the hidden stories history tried to forget. We upload new documentaries revealing the untold truth behind the world's biggest stars, scandals, and legends. Click the next video on your screen, because the next story is even more shocking than this one.